Hey, everybody, welcome to tonight's episode of The Rope of Hope. I am your host, Kimberly Plesia, and tonight I have Krystal Holm joining me. And we're going to be talking about creating a safe space to heal. Heal from toxic messages that we receive, heal physically, heal mentally, heal emotionally. You really do need that safe space to do it in. And so that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. Before we get started, though, if you would like to support this broadcast, support what I'm doing, please consider going over to buymeacoffee.com/, this fat girl life. As a follower there, completely free of charge, you find out everything. You find out about the book that I am in the process of writing. You find out about guests before anybody else does. And you get to find out about new projects that are on the horizon before anybody else. And let me tell you, in the next couple of weeks, there's going to be some really good information going out there. So make sure you go over there and follow me. And if you want to become a member, it's seriously $5 a month. That's cheaper than you could buy a cup of coffee at Starbucks for. And y'all know I love my coffee. So buymeacoffee.com/, this fat girl life. Again, tonight I do have Krystal Holm with me. Krystal, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Kimberly.
Of course. So before we get into our topic tonight, why don't you
hmm
tell everybody just a little bit about yourself?
Um, well, I'm Krystal Holm. I'm a feng shui designer and a clutter expert. I'm actually the founder of Design Life Studio and the creator of the Design Life Method. And I help work from home entrepreneurs to declutter and design a workspace that really empowers them to create the life and the business that they want.
And you really kind of got into this because of your own experiences, correct?
I did, yeah. This has sort of been you could really call it my life's work. like to be quite honest, yeah, it sort of was my calling from a young age.
Well, let's go ahead and get into things
hmm
because your story is what got you to this space. So at this point, I'm going to kind of let you jump in and take over and share what you went through with growing up and later on in life.
Sure. Well, I grew up in a super abusive household actually, and when I was about 8, my parents divorced and remarried, and my mother remarried a pedophile, and um, my dad remarried a witch, essentially. And so she taught me all about magically creating a different sort of life for yourself. And in the situation that I was in at that time, that's sort of what I needed to be able to escape from just the constant abuse, right? The constant being told how hated I was, and how worthless and stupid, and all of the things. Um and I just sort of needed that in my life at that time. I grew up with a lot of abuse. It continued really through my early adulthood, right? I when I graduated high school, I sort of started adult dating and relationships, and wound up in several abusive relationships in a row, um, before I really uh, found myself. Maybe, is that a good way to put it? Like, where
Hmm.
it was sort of like I got to the end of, I'm tired of this. Like, something has to change. Um, I need to change because my life is not what I dreamed it would be, and so I sort of started on that journey.
Well, and I think a lot of times when we get those toxic messages really ingrained into us at a young age, that leads into you fall into a pattern of toxic relationships in especially early adulthood because you don't feel like you deserve anything better. And it's not until that switch flips that you start realizing, hey, you know what? I can do better. I can be better. I deserve more.
that was for sure the case for me. I'd reached a point where I was just pretty miserably unhappy with every part, of my life. And um, I just sort of started on this different journey. I'd always wanted to have my own business. My grandparents were entrepreneurs, so I sort of grew up in their TV shop, playing I'm the boss in the office, and so um, I, I I I actually had started a business, and I was very lucky. It was like a network marketing company, and they were very big on training there. And so I had really sort of started like this idea of group training to get better at the sales part and the business part. And so I had already sort of had this introduction into like personal development. And when I was a child, right, when I told my mom that her husband was abusive, um, she called me a liar and she covered up all of the evidence of this. And then she took me to a therapist and told him, Krystal's a liar, so we need to fix her. And so every time I would tell him about my abuse, he would call me a liar and tell me like I need to settle into taming like a wild horse. It was really its own trauma in and of itself. And so for me as an adult, traditional therapy like wasn't it didn't feel like a safe option when I was at that point of this is not what I dreamed about. This was not like the vision that I had, and I'm not happy, and I want to do something different. And so I was very fortunate that a friend invited me to like a personal development seminar sales pitch. And I went in and I didn't even realize like it was a pitch. They were just talking about it, and I asked him if I could go, and I dove in like with both feet into sort of this alternative modality of healing, right? These very experiential programs that I could go to, like a weekend or a week long or 2 weeks long, like retreats and stuff like that, where we would go in and face those sort of inner demons.
Mhm.
And for me, that worked, right? Being able to bring it up and let it out of my body um, really was what helped me to be able to release it.
Well, and then later on in adulthood, you went through a work injury.
I did. I did. It was um, it was several years and several businesses later. Actually, I was working at a job, and I hurt myself at work. I tore a tendon in my groin. And
Oh,
so, yeah. And at first, I wasn't really sure what I did, right? But I also had this very deeply ingrained work ethic that you just don't take time off unless you are on your deathbed. And so I didn't like go in to get care right away. Um, and then when I did, they couldn't really figure out what I did. It actually took them a year and a half to
oh,
diagnose what I did. So all of that time, I was just sort of walking around on it. They left me home on bed rest for a while. It was workman's comp, so they did everything that they could to kind of invalidate my claim or to call me a liar, which of course brought up everything from my childhood, right? All of this, you're lying, you're faking it, you're making it up, and the denial of all of the medical treatment, right? My doctor would try to send me to a specialist, and they got rid of her, and then they got rid of the specialist. And I mean, they do their shady dealings, in the insurance world to avoid paying for things. And so with that battle, that brought up a lot of my own internal things around self-worth too. And so while I was home on bed rest and I was sort of trying to build a company and putting myself really on the back burner. Um, and it wasn't working, right? Like again, it still wasn't working. And it's funny because, I had tried to start numerous businesses previously and failed. And I always sort of blamed it on the fact that it was, I could only get small amounts of hours, right? Because of I have to work a full-time job to pay
mm-hmm.
my bills. And so I can only dedicate a small amount to building my dream. But here I am, I'm home 24/7 on bed rest, dedicating all my time towards building my dream. And it's not happening. It's not really, I just am getting more and more stuck. And my body was getting more and more stuck too. Um, and so there came a point where I hired a business coach, and she hired me. She hired me to design her space. And in the process of doing this, she had asked for a self-care space right in her office. And it actually reminded me, of something I had learned years before that when I working as a designer with um, entrepreneurs mostly. Um, they all wanted that sort of thing. So it was sort of this aha moment of, maybe you should do this, right? And you should, instead of dedicating, 40, 50, 60 hours towards trying to figure out how to turn your passion into a company, um, spend a little bit of time on you. And I started, I functionated my place and created this sort of healing zone for my body. And I started doing yoga there every day, um, to try to not wind up in a wheelchair for the rest of my life, right? I sort of had a feeling that that was what was happening, or that was what was going to come, right? If I couldn't really get any help from the insurance people, I knew I was going to wind up in a wheelchair for the rest of my life, and that was just not okay, right? So I started fighting back and doing it on my own.
Well, and I think you mentioned, something that's really important that we forget about is that ability to have that self care space. Oftentimes, when we think about self care, the first word of that is self. And so then you start, is this selfish of me to want this self care? Is this selfish of me to need this time or this space? And I think that honestly is one of the first, hurdles that we have to jump of getting past that I'm being selfish moment to I need this
Right.
to heal mentally, emotionally, physically, because we can't do it without being able to focus on self.
Right. I don't know about you, but I very specifically was taught that anything that I did for myself was selfish. Didn't really matter what it did. If I was sick and running in fever, it's selfish because
Hmm.
now my parents had to miss a day of work. Right. So it was just these weird backwards beliefs that we get taught, especially around self care and how selfish it
Well,
is, and
and
how
even
we're
in
supposed
the
to be
corporate world,
100% selfless and give to everybody else. But yeah, you just can't. Like you,
we're given that same message in the corporate world though. Because
yes,
how often do you have a moment where you call in sick to work and you get the, oh, well, we're going to be short staffed. Oh, well, are you really sick?
right. I've had bosses that were like, you have to bring a doctor's note. I'm like, I am, 30, 35, 40. I'm a grown up. I know when I'm sick, and I don't need to go to the doctor to justify taking a day off for myself. But that's where I was back then. I was very much in the I couldn't take time off. Even though I was injured, I was like, I can't take time off. Partly it was, I had bills to pay, and it was how am I going to pay them? But partly it was that exact same ingrained thing that taking time for myself was wrong and selfish somehow, that I'm not allowed to do that unless it's life, you know, life ending. But this was in fact life altering. And it took that. It took that to really shift my perspective around it. And even in the beginning, I still didn't. I only gave myself like small amounts of and dedicated most of my time um to like work.
And
Um
actually, we just had a comment of another thing that employers, corporate America will say is, how sick are you?
right.
Are
And
you
that
sure
is
you
so
can't come in?
right. And when you think about that deeply, that is really so stupid. So stupid, because I'm sick and you want me to come in and now get all the rest of the staff sick as well.
Oh, and I actually just the other day read a thing on this, and we're going to take a quick little rabbit trail because yeah,
Hmm.
squirrel.
Yep.
But they were talking about the one of the new variants,
Hmm.
but how people who are working jobs that aren't full time, or whatever they're working, entry level jobs especially, are going to sick knowing that they have the new variant
Right,
because they
but they
can't
can't
afford to pay the
afford, they
bills.
can't, right, they can't afford to take care of themselves. And that's sort of where I was at the time, right? When I hurt myself, I was I was like, if I don't go to work, I'm not going to make enough money to pay my bills. There's no alternative. Like, I don't, and even when they put me home on bed rest, and I had work comp money paying for a little while, but that runs out too, right? Eventually they're just like,
Hmm.
until we make these decisions, we're not going to pay you anything. So it's like, well, now what? I can't walk, I can't work, I'm stuck at home. What do I do? How do I support myself? Right? There's really no way to do that. And so,
Story of my life right now.
right. And so I was like, well, this is a perfect time for me to start a business. And I like went in all that, but I wasn't paying attention to my health. And it was about almost 2 years from the point of the injury until, it got to where I was like, I can't do this. I have to, and I just sort of, I was doing self-care, but clearly not enough. And it was still like getting worse. And I literally came to a point where I was like, I have to shelve everything. And the only thing I can focus on is my physical health and my self-care, because I am reaching a point where I literally can't walk. I was past the point of I couldn't walk. I couldn't go to the grocery store and walk up and down one aisle by myself. I had to take the little cart. I couldn't get help from the doctors, right? Because every independent medical examiner they sent me to said there was nothing wrong with me. But they wouldn't let me go to an actual doctor who would tell them like I said, it took a year and a half to diagnose what I had done. And then another almost year and a half before I could get surgery that I needed, right? Because I actually needed surgery to repair the damage. So it was 31 months from injury to surgery, so just about 3 years total. Um, and Yeah, and it was the last couple, right, that I had started a self care practice, and really it sort of helped turn it around, right? The doing the physical care and then the mental care that went to it, right? Decluttering the all of that crap that was probably the biggest part of that battle, was having so many people constantly not tell me directly your life is worthless and you don't matter, but it was very much reinforced with, well, you don't need to go to this specialist, or you don't need to go to a doctor for that. Just suck it up, or just quit, right? Really just quit fighting and go over there and die in your corner, is kind of what they wanted. And so the definitely fighting the mental um trauma was even more than the physical.
Hmm. And so now you've created this business that is focused on allowing people to have that safe space to where they can do the self care that they need,
Hmm.
as well as, live their dream business.
Right. In this journey, I really figured out that is the key. That's the key piece, right? I had a mentor that would tell me all the time, you are the number one asset in your business, right? And it took me a long time to really, really grasp that, we spend, if you're in business, you're in business to create assets so that you
Hmm.
can, right? And
Because if it
but
don't make
without
dollars, it don't make sense.
Right, but without the asset of my health, right? My physical body, my being, my being alive. If I'm not alive, this business doesn't exist. If my health is not, right? And when my health was bad, my business didn't exist,
Hmm.
right? And the more I stopped and put my self care the more everything blossomed. And it was really, it was it was an experience in lesson learning. Like it was a totally different lesson than anything I'd ever been taught. And so yeah, now I get to work with my own clients in helping them create that space for themselves.
I love that. So, based on today's conversation, to anybody who watches this or hears it, I am going to issue a challenge. It is a self care challenge. I want you during this week, the week that you're hearing this or watching it or it reaches you, do one thing that is self care that doesn't have to do with paying a bill or keeping a house or whatever is bringing in income, because those are not self-care. Those are important, but those are not self-care. Self-care is doing something to benefit and enhance yourself, to bring peace, to bring relaxation, to bring harmony within yourself, hence the term self-care. So I am going to issue the challenge that you do one thing that is self care. And I want to know what you did. I want to know what brought you that peace, that harmony, the relaxation. What were you able to do for yourself to help with self care? That is the challenge I'm issuing. Krystal, I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing,
Absolutely.
what you went through and how it got you to this space
Of
where
course.
you're able to make self care a priority, not only for yourself, but for others. I think that is amazing. And so much of it right now, especially with what I'm dealing with personally with my health and being a solopreneur, a lot of what you said really even resonated in me, in myself, and what I need to be doing. So thank you for inspiring that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I'm glad that I could inspire that for you.
Well, I do have one final question for you, and I told you I was going to ask this, but I didn't tell you what it
Okay.
was.
Okay.
What is the one quote from somebody else that has inspired and motivated you the most?
That has inspired and motivated me the most. Um, Goodness. That's a good question. That's a good question. I'm trying to think of like there's something coming into my head and but I can't quite think of exactly what it is. And it had to do with um failing does not make me a failure, right? I have failed does not make me a failure. Um and I don't that's just the quote. I don't even know who said it or if that's quite even the whole piece to it. It's just that's sort of what coming up. And that
The mantra that sticks with you.
yeah, that was a big thing for me, right? Because um I had tried, like for me when I started self-care, I started a yoga practice, right? That was what worked for my body. But I had tried for 10 years to start a yoga practice. I had failed over and over again. I had failed at a lot of things, but that didn't mean that I was a failure. And that little shift in mindset was really huge for me in also being able to start to include self-care, right? Because it was hard for me in the beginning, right? I failed a lot at trying to make it stick and
Hmm.
to right not have that guilt around it. So yeah, just
I absolutely love that. Again, thank you so much for coming on and sharing and kind of reminding even myself that self care is important. And we do need to take that time and that space unapologetically and make sure that we are okay as well, because you cannot pour for an empty cup. And if you are not okay, if you are not taking care of yourself, you cannot help provide for somebody else.
Right.
So thank you again for that message.
For
I will
sure.
be back again next week. I will have Heather Martinez on the show, and she's going to share some of her personal stories with us next week. So make sure that you tune in, make sure that you are subscribed, you've hit the bell, you're getting the notifications for this channel on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram. I'm everywhere, you guys. Make sure you're following. I hope everybody has a great night.